I'm here with Lou Moore, a professor of history at Grand Valley State University, focusing on African American history, gender history, and sports and history. How are we doing today, Lou?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So, just jumping right in, last fall you wrote about MLB being able to stop the recent decline of Black players all the way back in the 1970s. Just why was that era so crucial for the Black baseball player?
Yeah, so I think it's at a time where you're starting to hit its peak, right? And I think and MLB knew it, and they saw that things were changing. But at the same time, you have the rise of like professional football becoming really popular. You have basketball becoming really popular. If you think about it, right? That Larry Bird Magic Johnson game was that like 1979, and so there's starting to be a shift in popularity where baseball is losing it. But at the same time, you have real deal Black superstars in the game, old and young, like Harold Baines that represent the youth. Ozzie Smith is coming to his own. Dave Winfield would eventually be the highest paid player. So you have a lot of talent there, but you also have a rising problem, and baseball saw it and didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, I hear you there. And recently, the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sports at the University of Central Florida found that as of opening day 2022, the percentage of Black or African American players was at 7.2%, the lowest percent since the organization started collecting that data. Just what do you think is the most glaring reason as to why there are fewer Black players in baseball today? And can this trend be reversed?
Right. So I think there's two reasons. One, it's the past. It's the past of not doing anything about it. So you get to the late 70s and early 80s. There's a shift in the draft where you really focus on college players, and a lot of Black players are at HBCU. So it doesn't mean that they're not getting drafted, right? So someone like an oil can boy will come out of an HBCU, or before that, Cecil Cooper will come out of HBCU. Andre Dawson, I believe Tim Raines, right? Doesn't mean that they're not getting drafted, but the opportunities aren't there. There's a lack of Black scouts at that time. So you have that. But today, I think the problem in recent years it gets worse because baseball costs money, right? So back in the day, when all these guys are coming up, they're coming up on the playground, the public school league, right? There's institutions in place, so it's affordable. Even though you might not have a lot of money, you could put together a bat and ball, Sandlot style, right? Shout out to Sandlot, but get stuff together so you could play. Today, that doesn't exist, right? You have to play travel ball because you could play little league or the wild ball, but the competition's not there. You have to spend hundreds on a bat. You have to spend thousands on travel, right? You have to pay for the coaching, all this, and I think the access to the game is changing, not only just for Black folks, but people who don't have the means to get there, who don't live in the suburbs, who can't travel, especially today. Gas prices, even cheap in the Midwest, I think we're at like 480. Imagine having to travel this weekend for a travel ball tournament in in Fort Wayne, Indiana, right? One of those places where there's this huge facilities. It's going to cost you hundreds of dollars just to get there.
Yeah, understand that for sure. And that kind of goes with my next question of the game of baseball as a whole is also trending in the wrong direction when it comes to popularity. You mentioned something about the pricing and youth league baseball. Just do you think that the lack of Black and African American players coming into the league is a direct result of the lack of popularity in the sport as a whole?
That's a tough question because it's always been there, right? I think people have been raising that point since the 70s that you have to compete with the NFL, you have to compete with the NBA. And I think you get into the 80s, that competition increases because now it's not just Magic, it's Michael, it's Charles Barkley, they're on the commercials. But at the same time, baseball had its stars. You can't tell me that Bo Jackson wasn't big, or Ken Griffey Jr. wasn't big, or Eric Davis, the greatest player of all time. I just said that. Yes, wasn't big. Everybody loves Eric, but baseball fumbled the bag, right? And today they have someone like a Tim Anderson. You can lift Tim Anderson up higher than anybody in this game if you want, right? You don't have to Mike Trout him where he's just this kind of boring superstar. You could build around Tim Anderson. Cincinnati Reds has Hunter, if I am I right, Hunter Green, right? You could build around Hunter Green. I don't know if he has the flair of a Dontrell Willis, but if you're in baseball, you can't let this young crop of Black stars go to waste. You just can't. Like, you're at a time that it's necessary to build, because I think a Tim Anderson, maybe he's not as big as whoever the most, a LeBron, right? You're not get there. LeBron's fading, but he's not as big as maybe a superstar NBA player, but he can get there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. There's definitely opportunity for that black player like a Tim Anderson, Mookie Betts, et cetera, to really step into that spotlight. And given what recently happened with Josh Donaldson making insensitive and offensive remarks towards Tim Anderson, just how can the MLB educate its non-minority players to be more inclusive?
Yeah, that's hard, right? Because I think we ask the same questions everywhere, right? At college campuses. So I'm out of college campus, and universities spend a lot of money, probably too much money on trying to educate folks, right? But by the time you're like 18, 19, 20, it's really hard. And I think for a lot of these baseball guys, it's really hard too, because just the lack of diversity as you come up in the game. And all of a sudden, it's not until you're a professional where you get hit with serious diversity. Latin American players, Black American players, if you're on the Angels, right, you have Asian players coming in. And by that time, it's hard for you to deal. So it's really hard for the MLB, maybe if they have youth programs or something at these travel tournaments. But again, people are turned off by that kind of stuff. So it's going to be fall back on K-12 schools, right, to do the education. But you can see how hard that fight is, right? Like, you can't teach certain things in this school, and it's going to continue to have an impact on these players as they move into the professional ranks.
Yeah, definitely. It makes a lot of sense what you're saying there. And looking at the other side of the sport, the coaching, as of opening day, African Americans held 5.4% of coaching positions, which is also a decrease. Only 2 African American managers in the league right now. How can the MLB work to fix the issue of Black representation in the coaching staff?
Yeah, I mean, that's just as hard, right? Because the coaches that they have are, I'm not gonna, Dave Roberts pretty old, but Dusty's old, right? And no knock on him. He's a miracle. He gets fired, he gets hired, and that rarely happens. But the trend for coaching, just like in other leagues, is going with this kind of young, hot analytic guy. And I think baseball has to have somebody in place, 1 or 2, where they could be that model, right? It's rare that you see the Black person being represented as the model, as this young, hot analytics person, right? There's no Black Theo Epstein or whatever. I know he's not a manager, but the face of this has to be somebody Black, or it doesn't have to be the sole face, but you have to have a Black face there that you could put up for everyone else to see, because all these leagues are copycat leagues, right? If one team gets this new, like say the NFL, if one team gets that new hot coach on offense, like the Rams did, everybody's going to try to do that. Few will go the opposite way. But MLB is faced with the same problems. Even though the Braves win the World Series with an old guy, even though the Astros have an old guy, I think the way things are trending, you need a younger coach there who you're able to say, hey, he gets it. He gets the number of games. Just, we're going to hit home runs, and that's all we're going to do. And we're going to sub our pitchers out every at bat, right? Like, you have to have somebody who could be, put in that position.
Yeah, I understand you there. And you had mentioned a little earlier how the scouting department kind of impacted, at least in the 70s, impacted the game and the popularity today for Black players. Looking at kind of the statistics of the MLB draft between 2012 and 2021, only 17.5% Black or African American players were drafted in the first round. But according to several outlets, the top 3 prospects in this year's draft are all players of color. Just, do you think that could signal that there is a change on the horizon, or do you think it's just merely an outlier of this is just the talent pool that we got?
It's tough to say. I think when we deal with like Black talent at the game, there's always top talent there, right? And I don't think that's ever changed. It's the people who don't get the shot, right? And I think MLB has always been able to recognize this guy's really good. I need him on my team, but you have to be really good. So it's not a surprise that Black players are top picks, right? Because there are those few who are really good, and those are the ones who stick around. But where's that, Mike Piazza, I don't know what round he was drafted in, like the 1,000,000th round or whatever, right? Yeah. Or something like that. But where's that guy, right? And I think if it's kind of back-ended and then those guys stick and do the grind, that's the other part, right? If you're fourth, fifth round pick, you're playing ball in Grand Rapids for a while with the Whitecaps, and then you're years away from getting to the Tigers, right? So maybe there's got to be some incentives to get those guys to be willing to do that, and that's a tough deal, right? Trying to go from I think we're single A out here, right? Trying to go from single A all the way to the bigs, it's not easy, right? Especially if you don't come from a place of money, so maybe bonuses on the back end for some of these other players to get a more robust league might be a solution.
Yeah, definitely understand that idea there. And looking at getting some interest at the younger levels, are there any other programs like RBI that can help kids get involved in playing and following the sport of baseball, especially in those communities where it kind of lacks?
Every community has these leagues. So out here, we're in Grand Rapids, there's a local police league. But again, the trouble with that is, you're attaching police to these leagues. But, the Y League or whatever, it's just you have to be able to get there, right? You have to be able to afford it. I think what these teams can do is just really be all hands on deck and spend millions of dollars, not to set up like camps like they do in the DR, right? The Dominican Republic, but to fund a lot of these leagues. I know some teams they do fund travel teams, and maybe you do that more at every level and create multiple teams, and somehow cut away the cost, not just supply bats and uniforms, but really figure out how to cut away the cost of baseball and open it up for everybody. Because I think once you do, you have a real opportunity to grow your game again. But if you don't, it's not just football and basketball you're worried about. Soccer's coming, right? And I think they'll figure it out quicker, right? To make it, even though soccer is really expensive if you're good, I think they'll figure it out quicker, because it doesn't take a lot of money to actually play soccer. We just made it expensive in America.
Yeah, that's the American way. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying for sure. And to kind of switch up the, heaviness of this conversation of a little bit on the lighter side, you mentioned in your article that you had a huge baseball collection back in the day. Just as a baseball collector, which was your favorite set? Did you like Topps, Fleer, or Donruss?
So I like Topps. I like Topps 87. I'm starting to really like Topps 86. What is that? Is this? I just got a bunch of junk cards. I don't even know who this is. Some no name, but it's Topps 86. So I like that. I really like the backgrounds of Donruss. So late 80s, early 90s. The borders of it. Topps, I think it's 90, has a pretty sweet border too. So what I do now is I'll probably pay too much, but I just like buying old packs and ripping them, and I don't care about the value. I'm one of those guys who it's like buying my childhood back, right? That's how I see it, versus, I don't care about the, what do you call it, PSA and all that. I don't need that. I just want that feeling again of ripping it up and like, look, seeing a Bonilla, right? A Diamond Kings Bonilla. The other thing I like to do, I've gotten big into, not too big into it, but card art, where people just kind of repurpose their cards. And so I like taking Yo TV wrap cards and mixing them with some of the guys. And so I went to a card show, bought a whole box of Yo TV wraps cards for my collection, but also I'll cut it up. And so yeah, I could go on forever about this, but I sent somebody who's been really good to me, Heavy J Studios, that's his online name, and he makes a lot of card art. Sent me, you can't see it, some Josh Gibson's back there, the top 70s, which I love. So I sent him a Fab Five Freddy, but with Freddie Freeman on it. I can't show you the picture. I sent somebody a Paul Molitor with a third base. So if you don't know, if you're listeners, I don't know if this is care. So this is a third base card. And so I'll cut out the bottom that says third base. I'll leave the Yo TV wraps, and then I'll deal with the old school card. So eventually these two will go together, and you'll have a third base Bobby Bonilla card, and it just sits here, or I'll send them to people. Just, I like giving cards to people because it makes me feel good, like opening up a whole pack. And I hope that, this is a crazy world that people like enjoy opening the old pack. The new stuff, that's going to cost you. And that sucks. Like, $7 for a pack of cards, and you get somebody you've never heard of. That's not fun. But $1.50, $2 for Donruss, I don't care if I've never heard about the guy. It just feels good. So.
Yeah, definitely understand that. Very cool indeed. Well, in terms of questions, that's all I have for you today, Lou. So I just want to say thank you for giving your perspective on baseball today and baseball and race relations right now. And best of luck with everything that you're doing in the future there at Grand Valley State. And thank you once again, and hope to see you again soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.